Welcome back to the show, and today, my friends, we are going to be talking about Elden Ring, and more specifically, whether this could finally be the game to get filthy casuals, the lowest of the low, like myself, into the Souls genre. But before we get into that, just a quick reminder to like and subscribe if you enjoy the episode, and to let me know what you think about it in the comments section below, as doing all three of these things is going to make me happy and enter you into a competition to win Horizon Forbidden West, and full details on that giveaway can be found in the comments section below. Now, my relationship with Souls games has been brief and a little bit troubled. I dabbled with Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, but never got much further than the first few bosses before I bounced off to something new. And it wasn't a difficulty thing before some malformed creature squirts the words "get good" in the comments. It was more of an issue with the game being all stick and little carrot while being wrapped in an oppressively macabre atmosphere rather than me not being good at the game. I felt like I was in a constant battle with myself to enjoy it, which in turn made me angry at myself because I could see that there were objectively well-designed games that had been lovingly made with heaps of razor-sharp artistic direction. Something with me just wasn't clicking. It was like I was missing something obvious that everyone else could see. Regardless, I wasn't going to let that turn me off. Nothing turns me off. And since the Dark Souls franchise and its creator Hidetaka Miyazaki have a tenured seat on the pantheon of video game greats, I resolved to take another shot at finishing one of these masochistic masterpieces. When Sekiro Shadows Die Twice released in March 2019, I saw a potential on-ramp back into the genre. Here was a new take on the Souls recipe that incorporated fresh stealth elements and a posture system, and it was even set in Sengoku-era Japan, an era which I'm freaking fascinated by. This renewed interest and cultural curiosity allowed me to fight my way through to the Guardian Ape, at which point I was once again overcome by the decay-focused, melancholy, warped stylings of Miyazaki and forced once again to retire. Sekiro would not be my game. The allure of the world still was not enough to draw me through the harder bosses while feeling something akin to enjoyment. All I was left with was a pervading sense of shame and an unyielding fear and hatred of great apes that has stayed with me to this day. And that same story played out when Demon Souls released back in November 2020. I started the game with the starry-eyed enthusiasm of a child, and by the time I'd battled my way up to the old hero, I was just done. That same exact breed of fatigue had set in. I still hadn't found the game that would finally make me into a Souls fan, and looking back I think that was down to a mix of reasons that varied from game to game. For starters, whilst the level design has been superb throughout the series, there were never worlds that I actually wanted to spend time in. They relentlessly dripped with melancholy and often felt completely devoid of life. The lore of these worlds was also often difficult to uncover, which is a design choice on the behalf of Miyazaki, but still often left me feeling lost with only a vague idea as to why elements of the world were the way that they were. Combat was also, of course, incredibly distinctive and punishing, and I could never get fully into the weighty and intentionally cumbersome movements of the protagonist. And then there's the relentless and repetitious nature of the gameplay loop that inevitably emerges when you get stuck on a particularly challenging boss. You were often funneled through a closed gauntlet of predictable enemies before hitting the next boss encounter, which you would fail, and then have to repeat ad nauseum until you finally got the They are, in a sense, just innately inaccessible games to a lot of people. For some, the genre's fierce reputation for difficulty alone is enough to entirely put them off trying, and for others, the punishing combat and intentionally repetitive design decisions prove to be just a little too overwhelming. And I'm not saying that these games should be easier or that Miyazaki's design decisions were wrong in any way. To suggest such a thing would be wildly entitled. Games shouldn't be designed to appeal to each and every player. If a developer were to try and do that, they'd end up with a mediocre mess that pleased literally no one. Still, for gamers like me, a love of the Soulsborne genre has remained frustratingly just out of reach, and it always feels like we just need that one touchstone experience which is just slightly more accessible to get us on board. And I have high hopes that Elden Ring may be the game that we've been looking for. For starters, it's said to have an open world map. That means that you're no longer going to be funneled down endless gauntlets of frustrating tough as nails enemies near 100% of the time. Instead, you'll get to run around fields and forests to seek out those tough as nails enemies for yourself. Seriously though, the classic Dark Souls level design will be represented heavily in set areas and dungeons where undoubtedly the main story elements of the game will unfold. But the ability to take time out and engage in other activities, even if it's simply exploring the open world, will provide a whole lot of variety to that gameplay experience and provide an interesting way to level yourself up between boss runs. Feeding into that, the world is more colourful and alive than most Soulsborne games to date. I mean, in some regions of the world, there are literally flowers adorning the floor while animals frolic through the woodland. There's also a day-night cycle which will add further variety to the atmosphere and feel of the game beyond simply moving into a different level biome. Terrain traversal looks crazy fun as well. Along with being able to sprint outside of combat without putting a dent in your endurance gauge, you can also summon a mount with which you can move around the world with surprising speed and verticality. Miyazaki and co have also added the ability to jump without first breaking into a sprint, which will massively aid in exploration and open up new and interesting route options regarding how a player chooses to tackle the dungeons. There are also plenty of useful aids when it comes to navigating the open world. For example, in Elden Ring, there's a fully fledged map which players can fill in by finding map fragments. Furthermore, a player can add markers to the map to denote various things such as where resources or dangerous enemies can be found. And there's even a Breath of the Wild style beacon system to help you navigate to your next objective. And if you truly get stuck, you can call on beams of light known as Grace's guidance that will shine forth from the nearest site of Grace and set you on the right path. This is the world building and atmospheric balance that I always wanted to see from a Souls game. I want to be able to dive into an uber challenging, death-filled, boss-lurking dungeon, and after repeatedly dying, to take a refreshing break in the murderous open world outside as I level up and prepare for another boss run. Moving on, the combat looks like it's going to be a little more fluid and dynamic this time around, with a greater variety of animations and the inclusion of a Sekiro-style stance system and the introduction of the guard counter, which essentially lets you block and then retaliate with a follow-up attack that deals heavy damage to an enemy's poise. There are also items known as Ashes of War, which, when combined with certain weapons, can change their characteristics and imbue them with perks and abilities, such as the capability to attack with lightning or to summon a shield. And to top it all off, you can also fight on horseback when you're out in the open, and if you're really struggling, you can summon whatever the hell this thing is against more imposing foes. So you get the picture, combat looks pretty tasty. Furthermore, based on what we've seen from the trailers and the gameplay footage, I'm hoping that there's going to be a heavier emphasis on dialogue in Elden Ring, as was the case with Sekiro. Now don't get me wrong, I understand the vast majority of the game is going to involve hacking down grotesque monsters, but a little light-hearted conversation every now and then really helps lighten the oppressive mood. I'm also hoping that the mythology and lore of the game, which George R.R. Martin pitched in to create, will be a little bit more accessible this time around, but not to the extent where we get exposition dumps that would take away the mystery that captured the imagination of the OG fans. But regardless, Elden Ring looks to be a massive step forward for the Souls genre, and I have high hopes that this melding of classic Souls design choices with fresh new mechanics and twists is going to represent the perfect opportunity for fans like me who have struggled with the genre in the past to jump on board the community. And that's it for today. Be sure to let me know what you think about the game in the comment section below, and be sure to keep it here for all the biggest news, reviews and reactions from around the video gaming industry.